Oh, all right. Well, from the EBR Creation Studio, this is Jason Staples. And this is Unconquered with Doc Staples, bringing you the Hot Takes edition after Florida State falls for the first time ever to Duke in Durham, 23-16. And wow. This is something else, y'all. This team just finds every possible way to lose football games. It has gotten beyond impressive to, if I didn't see so much effort from so many guys in so many ways, and then just incompetence rearing its head, I would seriously be looking for evidence of point shaving. I mean, this is the way that they've found so many opportunities to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in a play-by-play basis, in a drive-by-drive basis, in a half-by-half basis, in a game-by-game basis, is absolutely remarkable. And this one, Florida State outgained Duke. I think this might be the first time all season that Florida State's outgained an opponent. Can't remember if they did that against Cal, but still didn't go over 300 yards in total offense, 291 total yards on the game. Duke had 180 yards total. This was exactly what I expected in terms of Duke being completely neutered offensively, and they still managed to win the football game because Florida State decided, well, since we won't be able to lose to Duke any other way, let's just turn it over 4 times and then have a field goal where there's a bad snap and we kick it right into the back of our lineman. Guys, you couldn't make this stuff up. Florida State averaged 4.4 yards per play, which is terrible. They gave up 3.1, which is a thoroughly dominant performance defensively. You give up 3.1 yards per play, and you're going to win that game almost every time. And in fact, I wonder what the numbers are on win-loss record when giving up 3.1 yards per play. I would venture to guess that teams that have given up, let's say, fewer than 3.5 yards per play are 90% wins over the past 20 years. And 3.1, it's probably 95% or higher. And you find a way to lose it by 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles lost, give up 6 sacks, drop a short touchdown in the end zone, drop a ball at the tail end of the half that would put you in easy field goal range. You just find ways to crush yourself. Big play, flag. I mean, it is comical at this point. The only way that watching this team is any fun at all is if you make it into some sort of drinking game or bingo card or something where you're just looking for the comedy in it. Because this is thoroughly unpleasant football to watch. Brock Glenn, 9 of 19, 110 yards, 2 interceptions. Both interceptions were bad picks. Also had a fumble. That fumble, got punched out. You got to have the ball tighter to your body on that, but that was textbook punch. So 3 turnovers there, and that's the ball game right there. And the game really ended with Cam Davis, who actually played pretty well tonight. 14 carries, 63 yards, 4.5 average, but he took a low shot right on the knee. Didn't look like that felt very good, and I think that kind of shocked him and loosened it up. And as the ball got hit from another angle, it came out. But I mean, in all honesty, what this game boils down to, as much as anything else, is those turnovers. But there's one other thing that this game basically boils down to, and that is this team can't block. Final play of the game, Duke rushes 3. Florida State has a 6-man protection and gives up almost immediate pressure, and would have been a sack if Brock Glenn doesn't pitch it back to the running back to Toafili, and he goes down for the loss instead of a sack. But look, you have a six-man pressure or a six-man package, six-man protection. You shouldn't be giving up easy access sacks. You might give up pressure eventually. Okay, fine. But you give up that kind of pressure on a six-man protection against a three-man rush against Duke, and you are 5 years into your program with the same offensive line coach, the same offensive staff, that can't happen. And in all honesty, and you all know, look, I have long been a guy who is hesitant to talk about jobs on the line, that sort of thing. These are guys with families, everything else. That stuff matters. And also, it rarely does any good to fire someone during season. Rarely. Almost never. Because you can't find you can't go and hire. The problem right now that Florida State has is they need to replace a bunch of offensive and defensive coaches. They need to basically clean house. And if they fired everybody tomorrow, they can't go and hire anybody from somewhere else. Those guys are still going to coach somewhere else until the season's over. That's one big problem. But right now, 5 years in, I'm not sure that this isn't a, you know what, you can just stay in Durham situation for Alex Atkins. And look, I like Alex Atkins. He's a good guy. He's a guy that I think after figuring things out, maybe at the next stop, he has a personality to potentially be a head coach down the line. But 5 years in, this can't be the product at that position. You've had 5 years to build. And last year was not great up front either. Last year, they hid that offensive line with basically the playmakers that they had at quarterback, out wide, tight end, and running back. I mean, Trey Benson was a home run hitter where, there were too many situations where he was caught for, tackle for loss or, 1 or 2 yard gain because he constantly got hit. But he broke more tackles than anybody in the country last year. I think he broke more tackles per rush than anybody in the country last year, if I remember right. And it wasn't even close. And he had to. This year, you don't have that. And the offensive line's worse. 2 years ago, it was okay, but it wasn't great. And when Dylan Gibbons wasn't healthy, they struggled. I know this has been a reconstruction on the offensive line, and they inherited an absolute train wreck from the prior two coaching staffs at that position. But you're 5 years in now. You've landed some recruits. You've brought guys in. You brought a bunch of guys in from the portal. You've made personnel decisions. It needs to be better in year 5. You can't be giving up sacks in a 6-man protection against a 3-man rush. And they did it twice on the last drive. Twice. And, there's just constant leakage in the run game. And yes, Duke is one of the best teams in the country in terms of tackles for loss forced. I think they actually came into this, if I remember my preview numbers, I think they were actually leading the country. They certainly were leading the ACC in tackles for loss per game. Okay, fine. But look at the schedule they played. Got a grade on a curve a little bit. And even with that, you can't give up that kind of pressure. You're year 5 at Florida State. You can't have an offensive line that looks this disjointed and this incompetent. You can't. Those are your guys, your evaluations, guys that you've coached, guys that you've had the responsibility to develop. Can't look like that. And if you can't block, you can't do a whole lot else. Now, they were able to run block today. Sack adjusted rush average, 5.6. Some of that was because the quarterbacks actually did a good job of keeping the football on some of the read plays. First time we've seen that this year. Made a big difference. And some of it was they actually did win on the inside a few times. But ultimately, there are too many situations where if you have a TN stunt where you loop the nose tackle or whatever, somebody's just coming buck naked, unblocked too often as soon as you have any movement up front. And guys, that's coaching. That's stuff you work in practice. That's stuff where, you learn to pass stuff off. You combo block. It's technique. It's communication. It's all of those things. And this team just doesn't do it well. And, to some degree, I was willing to give that a large amount of pass the last few years because you're still developing and you're also still having success. But as soon as you don't have some of the other stuff to cover that over, it becomes a real problem. And then you can't scheme around it all that easily because you got a set of wide receivers who couldn't catch COVID in a super spreader event. Unbelievable the balls that these guys managed to drop. I'm pretty convinced, and I've not had a chance to go and look at the all-22, but I'm pretty convinced that the ball that Benson dropped would also probably have scored, or it certainly would have gotten inside the 10, would have been a first down opportunity to maybe punch that in. I think he scores on that play. That was buck naked. Got exactly what you wanted on that little in concept off the motion, coming right inside. You catch that coming inside, no problem. Just turn it upfield and inside the 5 at least, probably a touchdown. That's 2 touchdowns you drop. I think that play completely changed the game. You score on that play and go up 10-0. You probably start playing with some more confidence. You probably win this game going away. But how many times does this team find a way in that kind of situation where, okay, this is the play that the whole game is going to turn on, and all you see is just bodily fluids running down a guy's leg? That's what we just keep seeing. And on offense, you got young quarterbacks, so, that's a factor. But you cannot be that bad on the offensive line and at wide receiver in year 5. You can't. You cannot be there. And at a certain point, some guys have got to find the bench if they're gonna play the way that they're playing and put the effort forward that they're putting forward. You've got to put other guys out in the field. Jaylen Brown on the interception, first of all, it was an okay route. That was on the quarterback. That throws on the quarterback. You've got to recognize that the corner did not pop his hips. He's too square. You can't throw that ball when the corner's sitting square. And you certainly can't throw it on that trajectory or to that spot. But Jaylen Brown ran 10.6 or 10.5 something in high school in the 100 meters. You can't tell me that if he doesn't run all out that he can't catch that guy from behind. But for all the world, it looked to me like he took off the gas there. Either that or he's lost a couple steps since he was in high school. And then he gets into it with a coach afterwards. And the thing that drives me crazy is after those two things, he dogs it on a pick 6 and then gets into it with a coach immediately after, and then he runs back out on the field and plays. That to me is a lack of accountability. You can't have that. That guy's got to be sitting on the bench. He's going to be over there for the rest of the night. You might want to just go to the locker room, son. And then that's the guy who misses the block and then ends up blocking a guy in the back on a key opportunity to score, to go down and tie the score at the end of the game. And that puts you behind the chains and you end up getting no points on that drive. That's the difference in the ball game. And again, that's accountability. I wonder, at what point do you just say, look, put one of the 3 true freshmen or 4 true freshmen, you got 4 true freshmen out there, put one of the true freshmen out there and let him make the mistakes at a certain point. But he's not going to be playing with that effort. You can't do that. Yeah, that's the stuff that this team just keeps doing. That's loser blood. That's loser football. And they play a lot of loser football. To lose a football game where you dominated defensively to this degree. Duke's sack-adjusted rushing average was 3.1 yards per carry. 180 yards given up, and you lose. Before I go, I want to thank my sponsors. That is EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Newsma of Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. So on the defensive side, really, I don't have a whole lot to criticize other than that scheme-wise, they still drive me crazy at times. But the thing is, those guys still are playing hard. And the one thing that persuades me that you don't have just systemic, massive point shaving on this team is that you see those kinds of effort. That kind of effort on the defensive side, that kind of effort that I see from, guys that then make a mistake later, and, it's an effort mistake in many cases. I mean, to drop a ball like Kentron Poitier did, that's not point shaving. That he's actively trying to catch that ball. But boy, it's amazing. But defense also finds ways. You had the one interception where that happens to be the play where you held a guy. Now, those are probably related, but again, it's just the way that everything keeps working with this team. You make a positive play and you find a way to cancel that positive play out. So, helmet sticker to Sam Singleton for the touchdown kickoff return. Gives the illusion that the offense could actually score 16 points in this game. Wow. And hats off to that whole special teams unit. Look, some of these guys they're doing the best they can, but this is not a well-coached, well-coordinated football team. It has just systemic problems all the way through. It's a team that has the talent in certain areas to compete with anybody they play the rest of the year. But it's also a team that can give up 3.1 yards per play and 180 total yards and lose to Duke. Wow. Luke Krummenhoek played in this game as expected. And, looked hit and miss, a little bit hit and miss. He's not ready at this point. I think that much is obvious. The game was moving very, very fast for him. He was sort of going through his decision-making process at like 0.75 speed. Just needs to get rid of the football a little quicker, get his eyes in the right spot quicker and trust what he sees. Obviously was not trusting everything that he saw at different points, but all in all, I mean, he still made some throws that made you go, oh, okay, the tools are there. The throw that was dropped by Poitier, that was a great throw. I mean, you couldn't put that ball in a better spot in that concept. Put it right between two defenders, dropped it right in the bucket, and dropped. The ball that Hakeem Williams dropped along the sideline at the end of the second quarter. You couldn't throw that a whole lot better on that concept. The arm talent is there. The ability to locate the football and make some wow throws is there. The one throw that he completed in the first half that was for a first down, that was the way that was fired, and just the look of that ball coming out of his hands and the location and everything made you go, okay, they may have something here. But in terms of decision-making and all of that, things were just moving 100 miles an hour for him. Things are going to have to slow down a little bit. But I do think that you need to continue to get him some time here and there. And especially if you're not going to be winning football games, you need to give both of these quarterbacks some opportunities. But it was obvious that Brock Glenn is just further along at this point in the decision-making process and how quickly he gets the ball out, the confidence of trusting his eyes and all of that, the 2 interceptions notwithstanding. Glenn brings more to the table in that front. But you can also see with the interceptions that Glenn threw and the fumble that he had and some of the other issues, you can see why DJ Uiagalelei played as long as he did. You had fans that said it can't get any worse. Well, you just scored 9 points against Duke on the offensive side of the ball. You had 9 offensive points. You did not score an offensive touchdown against Duke. Okay? And this is, Look, Duke is 6-1, but this is not a great football team. So, yeah, it can get worse. This is why they stuck with DJ Uiagalelei as long as they did, because neither of these guys is really fully ready. But both guys have shown some things that you have to like. And, Kromenhoek in particular showed some tools, arm talent-wise and otherwise, just mobility-wise and frame and everything else. Everything is as advertised. He's just raw. And, it takes a little bit of time for those guys. He does need to protect himself a good bit better. No doubt about that. But, yeah, I mean, at a certain point, the big issue is you have 2 drop touchdowns, one thrown by Brock Glenn, one thrown by Luke Kromenhoek. You get the dropped ball along the sideline and at the end of the half. That's 17 points left right there on the field. You win going away if guys just make those catches. And that's even without any corrections or anything being done to fix the offensive line. But right now, what you have offensively is you have a complete conspiracy of suckage, of incompetence, a co-op of incompetence, where guys are just each chipping in one at a time. It's like a lottery to determine who's going to screw up this play. It's like you'll have 10 guys that'll do it right, but who's going to be the 11th guy? Who's going to be the one guy this play who's going to screw it up? And they just kind of take a lottery, and that's going to be the guy. Okay, you're going to have the blocking, quarterback's going to make the throw, but you got to drop it. Okay, we're going to have the blocking, quarterback's going to pull it correctly, but then he's going to fumble. Okay, but then this time 4 guys will block, but the 5th guy is going to get blown by. Okay, this time lottery says that 3 guys are not allowed to block. I mean, it seems like that. This is an utter conspiracy of incompetence and suckage on offense that Florida State, that has never been seen at Florida State. And, I saw the Jeff Bowden days. I saw the end of the Jimbo Fisher era. I saw the Willie Taggart era. This is the worst offense Florida State has had since I've been alive. I can't really attest to the, 1975, 1974 teams and all of that. But in the modern era, this is the worst Florida State offense that has been out. And that's with a really good offensive mind and play caller and coordinator in Mike Norvell. And yes, he is that. But it's really hard to call plays for a team where you can't block and you can't catch. What are you going to do? You call up the play, guy's wide open. Okay, you schemed him open. Okay, now he's going to drop it. You call the play and everything, he's wide open downfield, sack, because 2 guys didn't pass off their blocks correctly, and quarterback's down before he even hit the back of his drop. Okay, now you're just going to, okay, that means we got to run the ball. Okay, so you're going to run your base run concept. Offensive guard gets whipped to the inside, center doesn't help in time. Easy penetration, running back has to, go outside of his track, fights for 1.5 yards. I mean, that's what's going on right here. This is not a play calling problem. There is a coordination problem. And I do think that Florida State has not been adequately using the advantages of things like the iPad and things like that on the sideline to be able to, work with guys and work through them as much as I would like to see. But the bigger issue is just in terms of technique, in terms of strain, in terms of catching the dang ball, that there's no amount of the coordination side of things and the play calling side of things that can fix that. You can't call around that. You can call around 1 or 2 weaknesses, but certain weaknesses are force minimizers. They multiply, they're force dividers. You've got something that's a bad thing, and now you're going to divide it even further. And, that's where Florida State's at. Not a whole lot to be optimistic about, but maybe we can put together a bingo card for future games so that at least we can make this entertaining. I got to watch these things anyway because I got to do these shows and so on. But boy, it's a tough watch, y'all. I'm going to go ahead and finish here. There's no real reason to pull any more feathers off this bird. Let's just go ahead and put it in the oven and we'll be done with it. All right, this has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. Thanks for listening.
If you've been enjoying this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Post and repost episodes on social media and tell a friend. And if you haven't left a review in a while, do it again. It really does help the visibility of the podcast. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my advertising partners once more. That's EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag.
I am especially grateful for those of you at the Dynasty level. That is Brian Leininger, Dave Blair, Jack Horton, Jonathan Kennedy, Lee Caswell, Travis Smith, and Tyler Kashishki. You all are far more generous than I deserve. Thanks to you all.
This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support. I made this.